This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and GatheringMagic.com, the #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content. Now it's time for our latest video with Alan Pennington.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Modern Blue-White-Red Gifts deck primer. And Blue-White-Red Gifts is a pretty interesting deck. It's pretty similar to some of the Blue-White-Red control decks that you've probably seen before. One actually did pretty well at the Pro Tour, I remember. And you know, some of the choices are similar. We've got like you know, our removal, our Snapcasters, things like that. The one difference is this one card, Gifts Ungiven, and it has multiple features in this deck. It can be both a source of card advantage and it can be a win condition. So I'll explain that briefly. What Gifts does is you search your deck for up to 4 cards with different names and reveal them, and they choose 2 and they put those 2 in the grave and the rest into your hand. Now Gift searches for up to 4 cards. You don't have to get 4. So if you just get, say for example, Unburial Rites and Iona, and you just choose those 2, they have to take those 2 cards and put them in your grave. Then next turn you just untap and Unburial Rites your Iona, naming whatever color you know their deck primarily relies on, and then you probably win the game. Alternatively, against creature decks, you can do the same thing except search Elesh Norn, and then you know all their creatures will be dead, and then you'll win the game that way. So that would be the win condition aspect of Gifts, where you just get Unburial Rites plus a fatty, and then certainly way more often than not, that's just gonna win you the game. Now, the other mode for Gifts is for card advantage, which is, you know, there are a lot of different options. You can search for, say for example, if you want removal, you can do like Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, Izzet Charm, and Electrolyze. Then you'll get like 2 removal spells to your hand. You can just sort of like take the good stuff route where you're just like, okay, I'm going to search for like a Snapcaster, another Gifts, and then like, you know, 2 good cards or whatever. It can also be used to like hit your land drops. If, you know, you're on 4 mana and you like want to get to 6, you can just Gifts for 4 lands and then get those. You can even make 3 of them utility lands, like you can do a Colonnade, a Desolate Lighthouse, a Tectonic Edge, and something else. If you want to go like the counter spells route, you can do like a Mana Leak, an Izzet Charm, and a Logic Knot, which is actually why the Logic Knot is in there, because you know, it works better with Gifts than to just have the 3rd Mana Leak. So yeah, that's just kind of how the deck works. It's your typical control deck. We're just trying to stall the game with counter spells and removal, just making sure our life total stays nice and healthy, and then once we survive into the late game, we can then go grab our win condition, and then play a win condition, and then, you know, win, of course. Just sort of the classic control strategy. And sometimes you can actually even hardcast these guys from your hand if the game goes long enough. Elesh Norn's only 7 mana, and Iona's 9, but they are both castable. And as far as individual card choices go, we've got Lightning Bolt and Path to Exile, which are 2 of the best removal spells in Modern. Lightning Bolt doesn't really need much of an introduction. Neither does Path, to be honest. They're both pretty much the most efficient things at what they do. And then we got a couple of Spell Snares, because 2 drops do see a lot of play in the format. Having like a 1 mana way to counter like Voice of Resurgence in particular is pretty nice. And then we've got Izzet Charm, which most blue, red, white lists would not be playing, but it kind of has like an extra feature in this deck, which is if we like actually draw these guys, we can just Izzet Charm and use the draw 2 discard mode and then put them in our grave, and then, you know, do the whole Unburial Rites combo. And of course the other 2 modes are as good as they normally are. Just these sort of versatile Spell Pierce and Shock stapled together. Then we've got Lightning Helix, pretty much the next best burn spell after Lightning Bolt. And gaining life is nice too, of course. You know, sometimes you'll be up against, you know, some other deck with Lightning Bolts, whether it's like Splinter Twin or Burn or whatever, and just having ways to gain life is pretty useful, of course. We got a couple of Mana Leaks. pretty much, you know, the best 2-mana counterspell you can ask for. Then we've got 4 Snapcaster Mages. Snapcaster Mage is particularly good in conjunction with Gifts, because if there's, you know, some random one of that you need, like say you need an Angry of the Gods, you can just Gifts for Anger, and then regardless of whether they put it in your hand or not, you can just Snapcaster it back. You know, same thing with any of these other cards, of course. So, great in combination with each other. We also just have like a 1 of Electrolyze. Not, you know, quite as good as it used to be, because a lot of the creatures that see play are just, you know, either resilient things like Kitchen Finks, or they have, you know, more than 2 toughness like Wild Nacatl or something. And they've just got like the 1 of Detention Sphere to handle things like Planeswalkers, like a Leyline of the Veil, something like that resolves. You know, it's just there to be like, you know, another thing we can grab with Gifts and just to, you know, be a generic good card. Then we've got a couple of Cryptics. Cryptic Command also doesn't really need much of an introduction. Very powerful card. Obviously, it's better against the slower decks rather than like the super fast ones. But, you know, being able to like Cryptic and then, you know, Snapcast your Cryptic back and just sort of count all their things and draw a card is really nice. And then, of course, we got like the whole Gifts engine and the win condition package here. And then we have the 1 of Logic Knot to sort of be our Mana Leak number 3 to go with Gifts. And then lands, we've got 27 of them. This is pretty much a deck where you want to hit your land drops like very late in the game. So we are playing a lot of lands. We have 8 fetches. Normally you might play like 6 or 7, but you know we're playing all 8 because having lands in our grave, of course, makes Logic Knot better. And you know, fetch lands are quite good at fixing your mana, as you would expect. And then as far as what all of these lands grab, we've got 4 basics here. 2 islands, plains, and mountain. You know, gotta have a few basics. If people like board in Blood Moon against you, you want to like be able to grab basics. Or if you just want to fetch a land and not, you know, shock yourself and cast something, of course, reason to get them as well. Then as far as all of our shocks, we've got pretty much what you'd expect. 2 Hallowed Fountain and 2 Steam Vents and a Sacred Foundry. But then we also have the 1 of Blood Crypt, which can be searched by all of your fetches since it is a mountain. And that's just there on the off chance that you want to actually cast Unburial Rites from your hand for the black half rather than white. So that kind of explains that. And then we've got some utility lands. We, of course, have 4 Celestial Colonnades, both a dual and, you know, a win condition. So having lands that are win conditions is always very nice. That's why we're playing the full 4. And then we've got 2 Tech Edges to kill our, you know, opponent's ban lands, potentially their Colonnades, because since it has 4 toughness, it's kind of hard for us to kill. So that is why that's there. And then we've also got the 1 of Desolate Lighthouse. Pairs quite well with our, you know, Unburial Rites package. We can Lighthouse and then discard these guys, which is pretty awesome. And also just smooths out our draws, make sure like we don't get too mana flooded or anything. You know, maybe we have like some 1 of in our hand that doesn't do a whole lot, like maybe Anger the Gods against a control deck, and we can just discard it. So, and then just to round out the rest of the lands, we just got 1 of Clifftop Retreat and 1 of Sulfur Falls. Not really too much to explain there. You could just play like more shocks, but just playing a couple of M lands really won't hurt your mana base. It's just nice because they come into play untapped without actually affecting your life total. And since we are going to be the control deck in pretty much every matchup, our life total is very important. So we want to avoid shocking ourselves when we can. And as far as the matchups go, the one I'd probably be most worried about would be Birthing Pod, both the Malaria and the Kiki variants. If a pod ever resolves, it's like pretty hard for us to win. Voice of Resurgence is very annoying against us with all of the instants we play. Even, you know, things like Kitchen Finks, you gotta like kill it twice. So, you know, that deck I'm kind of worried about, and there's a reason why Pod is the best deck in Modern right now. There are not a lot of decks that just crush Pod. Like, odds are what you're playing in Modern, you're probably going to be worried about Pod. So, like a lot of decks, we are a bit worried about the Pod matchup. Certainly not like unwinnable by any means. It's, you know, probably 60-40 their favor. Say like other bad matchups, like Burn is pretty bad just because, you know, we don't actually clock them. We just sit there and let them lightning bolt us until we're dead. And, you know, Burn does see a little more play on Magic Online than it does in real life, I would guess. I don't know, also, like, you know, Storm can be kind of tricky because we're not really playing, like, too many counter spells. We just, like, give them a lot of time to set up. But things like Splinter Twin are good. Even Affinity's pretty good just because we got, like, so much cheap removal. Pretty much all the creature decks we're fine with playing against because we just have so much removal that it's very easy to keep creatures in check if they're not resilient, like, you know, Kitchen Finks and Voice of Resurgence. So decks like, you know, Merfolk, I would expect to beat. Something like Fairies would probably be pretty tricky because, like, if they just resolve, like, a Bitter Blossom, there's not a lot we can do. So there's, like, a few fringe decks like that that might be kind of difficult. But for the most part, like, all the matchups are winnable. Like, we just have, like, a ton of really efficient removal and some counter spells and, you know, sweet, easy win conditions. So that's going to be good against most of the field, I would feel, for the most part. As far as the sideboard goes, we have, like, a few ways to improve our pod matchup. And the first is our second copy of Anger of the Gods. In the right meta, you can maybe even move, like, the second one to the main deck. You know, it's kind of hard to say, but I just really like Anger of the Gods against pod. It can often be, like, a 3-for-1 or more, and, you know, they have to cast creatures. They can't really just, like, hold them back against a control deck, because if they do, we'll, you know, just do our thing. So they kind of have to just extend into the Anger of the Gods. And then we also have Shadow of Doubt, which various blue, white, red builds will even main this card. In the right meta, it's certainly justifiable, but, you know, it's great against pod because you just, you know, kind of 2-for-1 them. You know, if they chord or they activate pod, you just stop them, draw a card. Pretty awesome. Also, like, great against fetch lands. Sometimes you're just on the play and you just have the 2-mana Stone Rain and draw a card, which is, like, pretty absurd against anything. So, like, Shadow of Doubt is certainly good against most decks in the format, I would say. You know, not good against, like, something like Affinity against them, like, the card just does nothing. But against things like pod or just random decks where you're trying to get an edge in mana, you can definitely board it in. And then also against, you know, something that could potentially come in against pod as well as, you know, Affinity, of course. We do have the one of Wear and Tear to, you know, kill the Birthing Pod and kill their Spellskite because all of their Spellskites, you know, they're probably going to main one and board one. The second one will probably come in to, like, redirect Lightning Bolts and Paths and Lightning Helixes. As far as, like, what else we got against Affinity, we also have, like, the one of Stony Silence and Engineered Explosive, just to sort of be like another pseudo Wrath effect that you can board in. You can also play something like Supreme Verdict and Wrath of God, either in your main or side, because in some matchups, like, just being able to gifts for, you know, 4 Wrath of Gods is pretty good, but, you know, that's, like, kind of metagame dependent. Then as far as, like, the rest of the sideboard, we mostly just have a bunch of one-ofs, with the exception of 3 Leyline of Sanctity. And since Burn and Storm don't really feel like great matchups to me, I decided that would be something we'd want to board against those decks, because, you know, if they can't hit us with burn spells, then, you know, in the case of both Storm and Burn, if they can't Lightning Bolt us, they can't Grape Shot us, they don't really have a win condition. So, against the decks you are boarding in, it probably gets close to a free win. You can also side it in against decks that are, like, heavy discard, by any chance. Like, I don't think there are too many, but there are, like, some, like, fringe, like, mono black discard related decks in the format. There's, like, the 8 rack deck, but that's, like, really, really fringe. And then, yeah, then we've got a bunch of other one-ofs. We just have Batterskull to be a a resilient threat against some of the creature matchups. Like, good against Zoo, good against Burn if, you know, you live to cast it, of course. It's just a solid card overall. We've got one of Combust just to, you know, come in against Splinter Twin. Kills Deceiver Exarch, unlike, you know, our Lightning Bolts and Helixes, so just having an extra way to kill that card is pretty nice. One Dispel for, you know, things like Splinter Twin, Control Mirrors, whatever. You know, explosives for the extra Wrath effect. Then we got this tricky one here, Porphyry Nodes. It's kind of a complicated card, but beginning of each of your upkeeps, you just kill something with the least power. So if they have got creatures in play and you've got none, then you just sit there and kill off all their creatures until they're gone. And then yeah, just one of Sowing Salt against like Tron and Gapeshift basically, and then one of Threads. Just it's good against like the black green base decks with like Confidant and Termagoyf. You're just kind of whatever. And then that pretty much rounds out the board. So like after board, I think most of our good matchup or most of our bad matchups get better, which is always good, of course. So like I feel like this deck is pretty like well-rounded and prepared against the field. Like I wouldn't say this is like a meta call deck. I would say this is, you know, just, you know, pretty close to like 50-50 against everything. It doesn't really have any like auto win matchups and doesn't have any auto lose. But, you know, we'll see. You know, I might change my mind after the rounds play out. So, I think it'll be a fun one. This is Alan Pennington with Gathering Magic. Thanks for watching.